I'm covering leadership and management. Now, the way I put this is, management is something people tend to inherit, and this is classic when people get promoted to suddenly say, "Oh, right, you can run this department, you can manage it." And the reality is that the manager is usually fairly supervised, fairly closely supervised with what you've been asked to do, and they're facilitating operations. So we're going to have a look at what a manager's job is. If you're a business owner, then by default, you become the leader of the business. But leadership is not actually something that's intuitive like a manager. So if you're a manager and you've got some work, you have to split it between 3 people, you chop it into 3 lots and you dish it out to people. So let's have a look at that and break that down, and that's what I want to cover this morning. And I want to start with the Action 16 Cylinders of High Performance slide. And just to recap it for people who haven't seen it, if we look at a management role, we need somebody to actually fulfill that task. And we need somebody with the mindset to be able to work through it. So you've got this amount of work, you've got so many people, divide up the work, keep them all busy. It's kind of a mechanical operation. And if we were talking about a 16-cylinder machine, we would score those 3 each. So you'd actually have a score of 6 out of 16 would be the manager role. Now, if we then move up to, if we look to people we admire in a business situation, leaders that we're interested in following what they're doing, what is it they actually have which engages us? And the reality of that is they have heart and spirit that they throw into the job. That's what people engage with, is this enthusiasm which comes out of these. So in this scoring system, they score 5 each, and they are the qualities of leadership. So let's have a look now at what these actually are, because if you are a manager, then I would like to think you're aspiring to develop more into leadership and move on with your career. And if you're already a leader, actually, what's the mechanical difference between a manager and a leader? So that's where we're coming from. And if we start off with the natural manager skills, simplistically, I'd represent it like this. The manager is set goals to achieve. So either their manager or the business leader or etc. would say, right, I want you to do X, I want you to achieve this, we've got this job that we need to process. They would then break it down into its element, and they would set individual goals for their team members. So they are responsible for looking after the team themselves. So in simplistic terms, this is the manager role. But we can then look at that and say, what actually does that consist of? Obviously, they have to organise a team around the work, and they have to ensure they've got the right tools for the job. Now, these are very work specific to whatever you're actually looking at. The other areas, sets and monitors performance, we need to know that every team member, or they need to know that every member of their team is performing. So they need to actually have criteria that they measure them on. They also need to report back progress to their manager. And the interesting thing here is they're rewarded on their team's achievement. So it's not so much on what they're doing, is how they get the team to run efficiently, because the efficiency is down to them. So let's break down some of these ones which are less industry specific. How do we manage performance? Now, it's about engagement with the team. And one of the most powerful ways that you can actually engage a team member is to have some one-to-one time with them and actually have it on more of a neutral, it's not a peer subordinate level, but where they can have an open discussion. And one of those powerful ways you can do that is with regular appraisals. One of the areas I find slips very, very easily if there's any other distraction is regular appraisals. And the next thing you hear is, oh, the staff are upset with this, they don't like that, there's people talking about this, there's gossip about that. Well, when did you last have an appraisal with them? It's so dramatic when you go into a company that hasn't been doing appraisals and they've got staff issues. there's two things that I would do. One is a team alignment, and the second thing is get them doing appraisals. And it's amazing how fast you can address what are usually trivial issues that are causing all the backbiting and the, the discomfort with the team. So appraisals is a major one for me. We then need to measure and challenge the team. So they will have personal goals and measurements of KPIs, which each individual team member would use as their measure as to whether they're doing a good job or not. Then you come to the company thing. So how well do they work with the company culture? And as the general indicator here is, it's far more difficult to recruit somebody with the right culture than it is with the right skills. So generally, if you recruit the right culture, you can train them the skills. So how well are they keeping to your culture? If somebody doesn't keep to your culture, they're generally a square peg in a round hole and they're never going to fit properly. Same with the mission statement. Are they working in the way you want them to work? Educate them on the rules of the game. What exactly are they authorised to do and what aren't they allowed to do? This is what gives them the interest in the job. This is what will keep people engaged. And obviously, from a mechanics point of view, discipline when required and hiring and firing. So that would be just a starting list of the sort of things that a manager would actually be doing. The manager also has to report back. So by reporting back to their manager, it stops their manager having to micromanage them. So if they give the appropriate data back to their manager, they can tell whether their department is running well or not. And again, key performance indicators, dashboard is a great way of representing them if that's the way that you go there. Progress meetings can be very quick to the point. Are we on target? How are things going? Are we hitting the goals? Team morale and motivators. Now, this is the big one for me because we've all seen instances of managers who have got no rapport with their team. The team hate their guts and the performance they get out of them is atrocious. So what we don't want is we want the team to be engaged. We want the morale to be high and we want the team to be motivated. But it's a very difficult measure. So what we need to do is we have a benchmark, we have the numbers we're collecting, is to watch out for any dip in those numbers and what's actually happening with those. Because if you see a drop off in the numbers, does that reflect that the morale is not being maintained? Because a manager, although he's doing a mechanical sequence of dividing up the work and giving them the tools, there is an element of looking after the welfare of the team. Otherwise, the morale will drop away. So that to me is an important point about managing what the team's actually doing. It's all about that, giving the opportunity for the team members to perform. So let's move up now to the leadership position. And what actually is the difference between doing the leadership role and the management role? And what does the leader do? Well, the first thing is they tend to be looking at the big picture. They're looking outside of their immediate responsibilities. They're looking at the things that are going to influence their responsibilities. And I mean, classic situation now would be for a business owner, that would be looking at what they feel is going to happen with a COVID situation. They've got their crystal ball and everything else to achieve that. But it would be the what ifs. So what's the response of the business going to be if we get somebody in the business goes down with COVID? How are we going to manage it? Do we have to isolate people? Have we got enough isolation between the team members? That would be looking at the bigger picture of things externally affecting the business. The future vision is so important to focus people in the business. What is it we're actually trying to achieve? And obviously, as I always say, achieving buying the owner a nice Ferrari is not actually going to inspire the team, but obviously it needs to be a win-win situation. What is the goals of the business? Are we looking to grow the business by a certain percentage? How are we on track for that? Why are we wanting to grow the business? What's going to be the benefit to everybody in doing that? Very often, a leader will be tasked with achieving a goal rather than being told how to do it. So a manager will be told, here's the work, this is the process, get on, get your team to do it. A leader would be challenged to say, I want you to grow the sales by X%. And then they would go off and actually go out and work out how to actually achieve that growth. So they would be responsible for the end result, not the mechanics of doing the job. One area which very often can take over your life is the leader's job is to control the overall department or business. And the trouble is, very often the leader has been fundamental in the early days of the business, and they will be used to doing many roles, if not all the roles in the business. And it's very difficult to let go. But one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader is to delegate the routine work to others. Because by doing that, you'll free up your work time, allowing you to work on the big picture strategy. And so this is one of the areas that I would always concentrate on, is analysing what actually they're doing. Are they doing the critical jobs in the business, or are they getting drawn in to the minutiae of the everyday operations? Because that will be a distraction. All great leaders attract followers and supporters. So one of the ways that we can subtly monitor how well a leader is performing is actually if they've got admirers as to what they're doing, and people just casually saying, well, everything's going great and it's all in control. That would be a mark to me of a great leader. So sort of skills, lots of it comes down to communication. And one of the great ambassadors of communication is being a great listener. As it always says, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, we should use them in that appropriate ratio. So being a great listener to people at all different levels will make you instantly generate that rapport, which gets you to get along with people. And if we refer to Jim Collins' Good to Great, when they analysed the real top level performing, level 5 as they call it, performing managers and leaders, what they find is they tend to be quiet, considered, think long term, and most critically, they are business orientated. They're not so much into it for what can I get out of this situation. They're saying, how can I get the best out of the situation for the business, which will then be stronger for the future. And so they're strategic thinkers about what's going to happen next. You need confidence in your ability. You can't have an unconfident leader who dithers and keeps changing their mind. It just undermines their position. Clarity on what they want to achieve. Uses emotional intelligence. I'm going to come back to this one because this is, yes, absolutely. But the thing there is about using the emotional intelligence and the way that you use it. And it doesn't mean to say that you have to be pre-wired to be highly attuned to emotional interaction with people. It's understanding it. Looks at the bigger pictures and understands risk and return on investment, because very often it will be their finances which will be brought into that, obviously. And so that would be my just brief outline on leadership skills. What about being a leader itself? How do we make the differentiation between just managing and leading? And I'm going to come back to where we started with the 16 cylinders of high performance. What it actually comes back to is passion. So if I was to challenge you now, what is it would be your soapbox routine if somebody said, what is it you do? What would you focus on? What could you talk on for 5 or 10 minutes and get really enthusiastic about? Because that is your passion. That is what engages people. Irrespective of whether they share your passion or not, those are the things that people buy into. If they've got confidence in you knowing what you're talking about and understanding it, they will then say, right, okay, this is my work's goal, this is where we're going, and this guy knows what he's talking about. So passion itself. And passion comes from being passionate about things. You need to understand your why and what are you driven to be passionate. So if you start with Simon Sinek, start with why, That is the driver. That's the thing which is important. That's what's going to create your passion. So what does passion then mean in business? The first statement, which I love, is people don't care what you do until they know that you care. And then you can look at it. Why is the reason to believe in you? And the what is your product, is the tangible proof of that belief. So this is what you're selling them, but this is why they're going to buy, putting it simply. And so what does that then relate to as a business? We have the vision, where we're going. We have the mission, how we're going to get there. And the culture, the way that we're going to behave. So these would be the building blocks that we would use in the business. These are going to be what the leader is absolutely going to have ingrained in the way that they behave and the way that they act and make decisions for the business. So now we need to look at how we're going to actually engage the team. And so let's start at the beginning. I think it will work. Engagement of the team comes down to, in essence, job satisfaction. And it's very seldom, or it's nothing to do with payment. If once you pay a certain threshold, then that gets the person in the door. The engagement is to do with how much they get satisfaction out of their job. And if we refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the top level is self-actualization, and we can use Maslow's triangle to actually equate across the business. And I do it as follows. Traditionally, Maslow, lower part of the triangle, physiological needs, this is your food and survival. Then once you're surviving, you look at safety and security. Are you going to be attacked? Is there anything that's fragile? Love and belonging, self-esteem, and the top one, self-actualization. Now, if these are the personal areas that we're looking for to engage a person, let's look at the business interpretation of these. Physiological needs, sales. Safety and security, profit. Love and belonging, the impact we make on clients. Self-esteem, the impact we make with the local community. And self-actualization would actually be impact on the global market. So the question then comes down to, if we've got these that we're trying to engage our team and get them working with us, and this is the actual interpretation for the business, well, how do we get them to feel that they belong part of an organization and associate that with the impact to the clients? And the trick here is really about recognizing your team for what they've done for the clients and the wider market. So it's recognition that their effort is appreciated. So Maslow is an interesting way of looking at team engagement. When we look then at the person, we have DISC. I'm not going to go into a full description of DISC, but it comes down to the communication style. If we take simplistic, I'll take this as a simplistic way of describing the different profiles: dominance, direct and assertive; influence, outgoing and talkative; steadiness, easygoing and amiable; compliance, precise and analytical. If you don't understand DISC, if you don't interpret what the profile is of your team member, then you can't talk to them in their preferred method of communication. This is a very simple thing to understand. And if you're talking to a dominant person, you would talk to them in a very different way to talking to a steady person. It's a hugely powerful part of your toolkit to just spend a moment thinking about the person before you have the communication with them. Because by talking in their language, they will engage that much better with you, and they will feel that you will actually understand them better, give them recognition. So let's now talk about emotional intelligence. All the studies have indicated that emotional intelligence is the key to the way that people get on, and leadership-wise is a key to outstanding leadership qualities. And so it's very important that you understand the way people are feeling about things. In recent studies, though, it's getting more complicated, because what's happening is there's two things they found. One is, if you're really emotionally aware, the problem with that is that you can become manipulated. And this means that your team members will play on the fact that you're very concerned over their welfare and actually draw you in. So you can get distracted. So actually, although an understanding of EQ is critical, you don't have to be acutely sensitive to it. You need to be aware of it and you need to use it. The second thing is there are other influences as well. And we have IQ, AQ, TQ, EQ. So emotional quotient intelligence is a great way of engaging with your team. But in this day and age, we're in a highly technological environment and it's getting more technological. So the first thing we have to say is actually you need a reasonable level of IQ to be able to assimilate all the other things that we need to take on board. But actually, where we're going at the moment, we're in a very knowledge-based environment. And if we don't keep acquiring new knowledge, we're going to fall behind. And if we fall behind, we're not going to be able to make good decisions. So we need to be working on our acquired quotient, AQ, to be constantly developing ourselves. And associated with that, as technology is becoming more and more prevalent in society, and especially in business, we need to have a technical understanding as well, because that technology will directly impact your ability to lead your team. So actually, I'll say to you, your IQ is fixed by DNA. You're not going to change that. And anybody who's running a business is going to have a reasonable level of IQ, which means that you're actually, that's something you haven't got to worry about. But actually, we need to understand EQ, but we need to work on AQ and TQ. So there you go. If you thought it was simple, that might just add another twist into the tale. There is one other thing actually which came out of these studies as well, is to do with the EQ. And that is, although in theory, a salesman will be most acutely able to interpret and work with a prospect if they've got a high EQ themselves. The problem with that is, although they will generate great rapport and they will get on with them really well, they won't be able to handle the rejection. So actually, when they analyze it, the top performing salespeople aren't actually naturally high EQ people. They're people who understand it. And that was an interesting twist in this equation from my point of view. So just to finish up, never underestimate the power of a whiffle. If you're after engaging your team members, if you're after knowing the minutiae of the things which irritate them, the little things which usually you can sort out and resolve, a whiffle is immensely powerful. And it's well worth doing team whiffles on a regular basis. It will pay for itself. So I hope that's been useful to you. Final exercise. Top takeaways from this session, shared in the chat box, while Nick coordinates the next changeover. And any questions, happy to field them through the chat box. Thank you.